Welcome back to the Cheap Heat Productions podcast. Okay, welcome back to the show. And today he's got a smile on his face already. Former NWA and WCW legend Nikita Koloff. How are you today, man?
Maurice, great to be with you. Happy New Year to all your wonderful listeners there, viewers in not only Ireland but around the world. I'm doing wonderful, thank you.
Brilliant, man. Brilliant. It's nice to have you on the show today.
Yeah, it's great to be with you. I was excited when you reached out to me and gave me the invitation, and was looking forward to talking with you.
Yeah, I seen you on my friend Jonathan of the Wires podcast last year, Pro Wrestling Defined. It was a really good show with Jonathan as well.
Yeah, which I love the title of your show, Cheap Heat. We could probably have some conversations about that if you wanted to.
I'd say you'd be a master in that.
Well, we used to, we used to get irritated with guys who, for those who maybe don't understand, cheap heat, that term in wrestling was an example might be somebody goes out and grabs a microphone and they say, "Hey, all of you, rednecks here in whatever town they were in," and I'm like, don't grab a mic and insult them on the microphone. Just get in the ring and perform your craft and get your heat from what you do in the ring through your actions, not your words. And so that's just an example of what we would call cheap heat, right?
Yeah, yeah. But you prefer to do your talking in the ring with a few cheap shots and maybe when the referee is not looking, an old eye poke or something like that.
Exactly. When the referee's back is turned, and the people are like, "Oh, turn around. Why? How come you can't see what they're doing?" And so, yeah, that's where honestly, that's where the real heat came from was, whether it was Ivan and I as a tag team or myself as a single was what we did in the ring. That brought what I would call the serious heat to the point of getting threats at the wrestling office, or as you may or may not know, a half a dozen times, I had fans come over the barricade, try to get in the ring and come after me. That's some pretty serious heat right there, right?
Yeah, I'd say that would be a bad move on their behalf.
Yeah, it potentially could have led to disaster for somebody. Yes.
Yeah. Did anything ever happen like that? Did anyone ever manage to get into the ring near you?
You know what? The very first time, because I didn't expect it. I wasn't looking for it. I didn't expect it. It was actually, and those who watch wrestling can go look this up on YouTube. It was the very first ever Great American Bash. I was wrestling the Nature Boy Ric Flair for the World Heavyweight title. It was my very first match against him. I was only 13 months, still relatively new to the business, 13 months in. And yes, the fan actually got his hands on me. Took me a minute to realize who it was. And then I made sure, though, after that, no fan ever got their hand on me again after that.
What did you do when he got in with you?
Well, and again, you'd see this on the video. It's kind of it's funny, not funny. I'm in the ring. Flair is down on the canvas. He's selling. Uncle Ivan, Uncle Ivan's out on the floor, and David Crockett was the special referee. And so somebody's got me like waist locked from behind and kind of pinned up against the ropes. He kind of had leveraged himself and with his weight. And I see Flair I see Ivan, I see Crockett, and I go, who? I don't remember this part. Who's got who? Who's got, and I realized it's a fan, and then eventually, like I tried grabbing him, and the cops finally figured out, oh, this guy's not part of the show, and they came in and snatched him, arrested him, and took him out of the stadium.
Yeah, it's a dangerous situation though, and I seen it only recently on Raw, like a couple of weeks ago. Somebody attacked, I think it was Seth Rollins. Someone jumped out with the crowd and jumped onto him. You
Yeah,
know?
and in the older days, back Maurice, when people thought, let's just say wrestling was real, right? I mean,
Yeah,
when they really believed that, many people, like Ole Anderson, for example, Ole Anderson had a scar on his chest from a fan who pulled out a knife and tried to slice him open. Like, it sounds a little
yeah,
graphic, but that actually happened. And there's so many stories back in the old days of this, in the 1960s and 70s, that that fans really, and the security wasn't anywhere nearly as good, and a lot more things happened back in those days.
yeah. I was reading that when you were getting into the business, Road Warrior Animal was a big part of it, and you guys have a kind of a story that comes from football into wrestling. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, Animal and I had a unique friendship in that I I recruited him out of high school to play college football. I saw him listed; he had some accolades in the local newspaper, and I like, I want to recruit that guy, and so was able to get his information, get his number, called him, talked to him, came over. He toured the campus with his parents, Joe and Lorna. I fell in love with the family. They fell in love with me. We became the best of friends and played a couple of years of college ball together. He ended up dropping out of college. I went on to finish college, only to find out I see him on the Superstation TV, TBS as a with his
Hmm.
head, mohawks and paint on his face, and then eventually he called me once I graduated from college. He called me and recruited me into pro wrestling, and that's really kind of how it all began.
Yeah, and you were kind of thrown in at the deep end, kind of. You were pretty much straight away nearly on television, weren't you? Did you find that pressure?
Yeah, I mean, day one, Maurice. I mean, for those who don't know my story, I encourage people, go to my website and order Nikita: A Tale of the Ring of Redemption. It has really the whole story all the way back to childhood, up to present day. I just added about 7 or 8 new chapters to the book, and they can get that off my website. But um, yeah, I had no wrestling training, no background. There's always a lot of rumors out there that a guy named Eddie Sharkey trained me, which
Hmm.
for the record he did not. He trained a bunch of my buddies, Ravishing Rick Rude, the Road Warriors, others, but he didn't. I had zero training the day I walked into Jim Crockett's office from a 5 minute phone call with Jim Crockett, the promoter, and literally Nikita Koloff is born in the hallways of Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm literally put right on the interview TV set and then told I'm going to wrestle, in on television the next night, having never been in a wrestling ring. It's a crazy story.
Yeah. Do you think it was because of your physique and your size definitely helped in that scenario?
100%. I looking back now, I feel when Crockett looked at me, he must have had dollar signs like rolling through his eyeballs,
Yeah.
thinking if this guy can work at all, man, I'm going to make a boatload of money off this guy. And fortunately for me, I didn't trip on the ropes. I didn't drop the ball, so to speak. I was able to carry the load. Of course, I had great help with Ivan Koloff and Don Kernodle, and eventually others that would teach me the wrestling business, if you might say, on the job training, if you will.
Hmm. I was looking up some clips over the last couple of days to kind of get ready for this interview, just to kind of see what is out there and maybe if there's something different to talk about. But when you YouTube your name, one man comes up and he talks a lot about you as Jim Ross. But then I was watching a clip of Jim Ross, and he said when you left in 1991, he said he referred to you as spoiled. And I don't quite know what he meant by that. But then he went on to say that, but me and Nikita didn't really talk that much in WCW. But yet the guy has got like a lot of videos about you. I don't know if you're aware of it, but there's a lot of clips out there of Jim just giving various different stories about you. So I'm just wondering, are you guys friends, or what kind of relationship do you have with Jim?
That's a really great question. I don't know if I've ever been
Mm.
asked that before. He's right. We didn't talk a whole lot off camera.
Hmm.
I have nothing but absolute total respect for Jim Ross. We have a mutual friend in Bill Murdoch from Asheville, North Carolina, who is very, very close to Jim. But so much respect for Jim and his career and what he's done over the years. And of course, what he's doing now with AEW with Tony Schiavone. I talked a lot more and joked a lot more with Shivani because Tony actually, whether he was in the Charlotte area or the Atlanta area, spent a lot more time, doing interviews with Shivani than I ever did with Jim Ross.
Hmm.
But Jim is probably one of the most, in my view, consummate professionals when it comes to broadcasting. I did not know. So you actually, what you just said is news to me. I didn't know he had so many things out there. And what's interesting for me, and even knowing and watching what they're doing now, I have seen a few clips from the past, and of course, even in those clips, in fact, I just saw one recently where he was interviewing Sting and I. Again, Jim was just so good. He's so good at what he does, and I just take that as a real compliment, that that there is that much out there in terms of him, referring to me. What he might have meant by spoiled, um,
He went on to say then that you were burnt out at the time. But then I think you
okay,
were back maybe a year later, weren't you?
yeah, well, some do, some don't know. Many don't know, I suppose. I The first time I left WCW was I had a wife who was suffering from cancer,
Yeah.
Mandy, and so I walked away to take care of her. That was
Hmm.
that was the decision I made. I felt that was a priority. Most important was she needed me home, and I was going to take care of her. And then after her passing, there was a time lapse in there where I didn't go back immediately, although I was invited back. I just needed some time, that whole, the grieving
Yeah. Yeah.
process. Um, and then, yes, I eventually went back, and really for a shorter period of time before I made the ultimate decision at the end of 1992 to just hang it up and leave on what I felt was leave on top of the business, after my career.
Yeah. One guy you worked with as well was Ric Flair, the Nature Boy. What was he like to work with? And, did he like to party back in the day with the guys? Like,
Yeah,
silly question.
he's pretty well on record of how much he liked to party. He makes no secret of that aspect of his life, and I would say as much as Jim Ross was the consummate professional in broadcasting, Ric Flair was the consummate professional inside the ring,
Hmm.
perfecting and performing his craft. One of the best of the best of the best all time in terms of just not only helping the Russian Nightmare become solidify my career, but Rick also helped so many others. I mentioned the name Sting. I mean, Lex Luger. I mean, you could go right down the list of who's who in wrestling that Rick, Kerry Von Erich, I mean, that he stepped in the ring with. And no matter how much talent you had or didn't have, Rick would go in and make that guy look like $1 million. He just had that uncanny ability to do that. So I'm very thankful and grateful. There's no way even to tally up the number of matches I had against Rick. Probably, I'm going to guess and say a couple hundred matches against him. And again, early on in my career, right, 13 months into the business, and I learned a lot from Rick. both psychology of wrestling and the mechanics of wrestling inside the squared circle.
Mm. And of course, with wrestling comes risk as well, as we all know. Was there ever what was the worst injury you think you received when you were wrestling?
So I had a number of them. One actually against Rick, nothing that he intentionally did, but
Hmm.
I vividly remember waking up on a Sunday morning about 5 a.m. in the morning. I literally had to roll out of bed, crawl into my on my hands and knees into my living room. My lower back was in the probably some of the most excruciating pain that I'd ever experienced. And I actually ended up driving myself to an emergency room, meeting our orthopedic specialist. His name was Dr. Joe Estwanick, infamous in Charlotte, North Carolina, who diagnosed what was going on and gave me some stretching exercises, and he actually gave me some muscle relaxers because that afternoon I was booked in the main event against Ric Flair in Charlotte, North Carolina, and also in
Hmm.
the Omni in Atlanta that night. So it was what we called a double shot
Wow.
in the main event. And I just wrestled him Friday night for, I think, maybe an hour, Saturday night for close to an hour. And something I did in one of those matches is what injured or tweaked my back. And so I showed up, like we did in those days. I wrestled in pain, both in the afternoon and evening, and got my back, back into alignment thanks to a chiropractor in Charlotte, and was back in the ring full force in just a couple days. Um, and then the other memory that comes to mind was Big Van Vader. In fact, my very last match ever in professional wrestling was against Vader, and he injured my neck that night, where my he pinched. I got a nerve was pinched in my neck, and my left arm went numb for about 3 or 4 minutes. I couldn't
Mm.
move it, couldn't had no control of it, and later the next morning, found out, he's a big guy, right? 450
Yeah.
plus pounds. I had a hernia from picking him up. So
Right.
I sustained a hernia, ended up having surgery for that. Did not have to have surgery on my neck, but did have to rehabilitate my neck. And it was at that point I just made an executive decision and said, you know what? I'm done.
Hmm.
So I just walked away under my own terms, never to look back, Maurice.
Yeah. But the one thing I always say to people, here we are now talking all these years later, and you haven't been wrestling. And I always say to guys, once you kind of step foot in the business, no matter how hard you try, you're never out of the business.
Well, and I appreciate that. And I feel very fortunate, one, again, to be doing this interview with you. I do a lot of different, whether it's radio, podcasts, television interviews, um, still involved in wrestling business. You're correct in the way of autograph signings. I think I did
Hmm.
12 autograph signings last year alone. Um, and I'm just blown away, Maurice, when I think about the idea of all these years removed, right? So my last official match, I believe, was November 7th, 1992. But for someone to still even want my autograph, let alone pay for it, absolutely blows me away. I feel so blessed, and I feel so thankful and grateful that even though my career was not as long as many others, like Ric
Hmm.
Flair, Sting, and others, that it apparently impacted enough people that they even still want my autograph. It's very humbling, Maurice.
Yeah, and it probably saved an awful lot of your body as well by having such a short career, I'd imagine.
Well, it did. Like when I look at Uncle Ivan, prior to
Hmm.
his passing, about the last 5 years of his life, it typically, he would say, take him about an hour upon waking to really kind of get out of bed and kind of
Hmm.
get the body moving. Wrestling is entertainment, but man, it really takes a toll on your body. And the longer you do it, the more serious type of injuries and or even if you recover from those injuries, when you get to be, 60, 70 years old, I mean, that's when you really feel the full effects of it. And some of the guys have had double hip replacements. Ivan had shoulder surgery. His neck was messed up. His ankle was messed. His knees were messed up. I mean, it's a very physical business, even though it's entertainment.
Yeah. So you were kind of never tempted to go back into the business, but one thing I always wondered was, did you ever get to meet Vince McMahon, or did you ever think about going to the WWF? Because I know you were loyal at the time as well.
I was very loyal to the NWA, to Jim Crockett, who gave me my break, and eventually WCW. Um, uh, there have been some who tempted me. Jeff Jarrett, when he launched TNA
Hmm.
wrestling back in, I think, 2002. I actually made a few appearances for them. In fact, somebody posted something recently with Vince Russo, and I was under the hood as Mr. Wrestling #4, and it kind of shocked the wrestling world at the time. They're like, "What the heck? Oh my gosh!" Because that's 10 years, 10 or so years removed from wrestling at that point. But I liked Jeff. I wanted to help TNA get started. I believe
Hmm.
competition is good, and in whatever field it is. And so I made several appearances for TNA. Jeff did try to talk me into putting the tights back on and coming back into wrestling. I'm like, I'm not doing that, dude. I want to be like maybe one of the only guys that actually retired and stayed retired.
Yeah, fact.
Didn't have didn't have 10 retirement uh, celebrations.
Hmm.
Um, Specifically to your question, I've met Vince McMahon 2 times, Las Vegas in a gym. We just randomly ran into each other. That was back in the heyday of my wrestling career. It was very cordial, very very respectful in both ways. Um, there was no talk of hey, come over to WWF.
Hmm.
There was
He
no
knew
talk
you.
of
He knew you though straight away.
yeah. We
Hmm.
knew each other. Yeah, we totally knew each other. Yeah, but
Yeah.
on both ways. Um, the next time I saw him was at Road Warrior Hawk's funeral, where I was the main one of the main guest speakers for his funeral. We had again a brief conversation, introduction, and I like to joke in saying this, Maurice. If WWE or WWF at the time did try to pursue me, they must have left a voicemail on one of those old recorders, and I missed it. We we never had it. We never had a conversation, and maybe they knew how loyal I was to the NWA. I don't know.
Yeah. Can we talk about the present life then and what you're up to now with the ministry? And can you just tell me what it is and what you guys do?
Yeah, just briefly. I mean, that's essentially uh, what I've been doing full time the last 25 plus years. Is
Hmm.
really just a variety of ministry, everything from crusades and revivals to preaching on a Sunday morning to doing breakfast, men's breakfast, luncheons, dinners. Um, a number of years ago, actually 2006, I went to an event out in Texas called Quest, and was greatly impacted. And I feel the Lord really put on my heart men's ministry. And so I began to get fully engaged with that ministry. And then in 2015, the total package, Lex Luger. Um, he was living with me for about 10 months, and we just feel like the Lord gave us a vision for a camp and
Hmm.
and men's conferences. And so we launched into these 1 day conferences called Man Up, which actually, in last year alone, I did 18 of those Man Up conferences. We do them in local communities, typically in local churches. I'll do one. I'll do one. I'm going to do a Man Up conference over the next 3 weekends. And I do a lot of those. And it's just challenging men, Maurice. It's challenging men. Our goal is to empower and equip and train men, and then really deploy men to go back home, and if they're married, to be a godly husband, if they have children, to train up and raise up their children, just to be a better men overall. And then that feeds into the shirt you see me wearing here, Man Camp. Lex and I co-facilitate these camps, one in the spring, one in the fall, and where the conference is really one day, the camp is what we call a deep dive. It's 5 days, 5 days, and I have a great staff. Men come in from all over the country. I've had guys come from 25 different states and actually come from Europe to come to these camps. And again, the idea for all your lady listeners, all your lady viewers out there, is to send the men back home to be better equipped, trained, and empowered to just be the husband, the father, the man that God intended that man to be. And in short summary, that's what we do. And man, I love it. I love it. I love
Yeah.
seeing men's lives
Yeah.
change, Maurice.
There's a lot of talk these days about kind of young male suicides and mental health with males and everything. This is surely like a way of kind of, I suppose, just bringing them away from ordinary everyday life and just showing them kind of what they mean to people. Is that part of it as well?
Yeah, that's a great perspective on your part. Is I like to say getting men, especially young men, like you said, outside the village is what I call it. In other
Yeah.
words, get them away, get them out of their comfort zone, away from what they're used to, what's their typical life environment. Get them away from cell phones. Get them away from computers and technology. And you are right. There is a real, I feel, a real attack on men at an early age, and trying to, whether it's trying to plant a seed for suicide, or just attacking their manhood in general, and just to say, no, you were created, you're a man, you're created to be a man. We want to empower you to walk in that manhood. Love your wives, love your children, and just fulfill the purpose and plan for why you are here, on this planet. And so Lex and I feel we've got a real mandate, to really challenge men, encourage them to come, whether it's to the conference or the camp, really speak into their lives. And what we do, Maurice, is he and I, we've got many, many years of experience in weightlifting and exercising, right?
Yeah.
In building up our physiques. We've both been world champions in wrestling and excelled on a football field, on a gridiron. Now, I'm talking about American football for all you out there in
Not
Ireland.
not soccer.
Not soccer. I'm talking about
Yeah.
American football. But so what we do is we take our many years of experience, and by the way, we want men to be healthy physically. We want them to be healthy emotionally and mentally, so they don't maybe go down that path and consider suicide. And of course, we want to help them be spiritually healthy. So our tagline, Maurice, is a whole man living a holy life, and just wholly available under the Lord and fulfilling their destiny. That's our goal.
Yeah. And all that information can be found on koloff.org.
Well, yes, that's one website, and or Koloff.net. Koloff.net. In fact, if they go to Koloff.net, they can find out more about Man Camp. They can follow me on all the social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter, etc. They can actually link to the Man Up podcast and catch some of the episodes. I've actually interviewed Sting, Luger,
Thanks. Yeah.
Magnum TA, Tully Blanchard. Got some great interviews on the Man Up podcast.
Yeah. Nikita, it was an absolute pleasure to talk to you today, man. Thank you so much.
Well, cheers. Is that what they say in Ireland? Do they say cheers?
Cheers. Yeah.
Cheers to all your viewers out there in Ireland, all around the world, Maurice. And thank you for having me on Cheap Heat. Dakota.
Uh,